Bienvenidas y bienvenidos. Damos inicio a la ceremonia de...
Welcome. This is the beginning of the opening ceremony of the second meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Escazú Agreement. We shall now watch an institutional video, a pertinent institutional video.
Nuestro planeta padece una triple crisis. El cambio climático, que afecta a los ecosistemas con sequías más intensas, olas de calor o el deshielo de los polos. La pérdida de biodiversidad de nuestros océanos, mares, selvas.
Biodiversity in our oceans, seas, jungles and forests, and the contamination, the main cause, the environmental cause of diseases. Such crises threaten the well-being and rights of millions of people, in particular the vulnerable populations. But our region has to face these issues, which are global issues, and we have to put up with losing the value of our common good, right from the frozen lands of the Antarctica up to the warm waters further on. We have a history and a historical milestone that embodies the knowledge of our people, the unity and diversity, and we have a treaty, the Escazú Treaty, that is at the forefront of environmental rights worldwide. The Escazú Agreement it paves the way for sustainable development. It is a road for citizens to walk, and it is indispensable to take decisions by accessing full and effective information, strengthening the instance for participation, and accessing justice so as to protect the health of the environment and those defending it. The Escazú Agreement finds us in Buenos Aires, Argentina, to work at its implementation and choosing the members of the committee to support the implementation and compliance. So let us commit. This is a tool that we will use to build upon a fairer future. Let us make environmental democracy reality for our people. Thank you very much. No. Unfortunately, the musician is not using a mic, so we can't hear him from the booth in order to translate. The thing is, she is using a mic, but that mic is not connected with the booth. I'm terribly sorry, but we can't hear her from here. I know I've said it already, but it's a real shame that the mic is not connected to the booth, so we can't hear Mrs. Esteves. It's a pity we can't translate what she's saying.
Agradecemos con este aplauso al Chango Spasiuk y a todos.
We thank Chango Spasiuk and all the musicians that played with him.
Buenas tardes a todos y a todas.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the opening ceremony of the second meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Regional Agreement on Access to Information, Public Participation, and Access to Justice, Environmental Matters in Latin America and the Caribbean, or the escazi Agreement. The escazi Agreement is the first environmental treaty in Latin America and the Caribbean. The pillars are to guarantee full and effective implementation of access to information, fostering public participation upon making calls, and fostering access to justice in environmental matters, as well as the creation of instruments allowing for the protection and safety of the environmental defenders. Present with us today are delegations from 21 countries of Latin America and the Caribbean, ministers and authorities of different countries in the region, representatives of the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, ECLAC, the body responsible for the technical secretariat of the agreement, authorities of the IDB and CAF, representatives of the public, representatives of civil society organizations, senators, congressmen and congresswomen, special guests, and public at large. Besides, upon closing the ceremony, we will have the special participation of the President of the Argentine nation, Mr. Alberto Fernandez.
Sí, 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, testing.
A continuación,
Now we shall ask the Secretary for Climate Change, Sustainable Development and Innovation under the Ministry for the Environment and Sustainable Development of the Argentine Republic, Mrs. Cecilia Nicolini, to take the floor. She will chair this COP2 meeting, the COP2 to the escazi Agreement. Thank you for your patience. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome, Marina. We're so happy. I am so happy of being here, and I want to thank you for having come from all over Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you to the authorities for joining us tonight. And thank you, Chango, for your fantastic music. I know you use so much time to put this show together. Chango would say, I'm going to play something very specific of Argentina, but you know what? I believe the music, culture, nature, we're all connected in 1,000 ways and in the same way. And I'm pretty sure that all of you here today will identify and relate to the music we've heard. So we are here to celebrate and hold the second meeting of the escazi Agreement here in Buenos Aires. A year ago, it was Chile organizing the first conference, and we were all in agreement that to wait 2 years to resume was too much time. That's why we decided to organize this extraordinary conference, because we believe placing the environmental agenda as a milestone of the region is absolutely urgent. And though escazi has been 2 years, I mean, it dates back 2 years, it has so much history and a lot of, it goes way, way back, and so much work invested in it. I won't remind you all the historical milestones, but just to mention a few, I remember, and you surely will too, the Rio Declaration in 1992 on the Conference on the Environment and Development, and how one of the principles adopted was Principle 10, fostering and encouraging states to guarantee access to information, public participation, and access to justice in environmental matters. 20 years went by, and once again, Rio again at the Rio Plus 20 summit, 10 countries of Latin America and the Caribbean, supported, as we always count on the reliable ECLAC, started building upon and putting together this treaty. I see so many faces of people that worked there. There were years and years discussing, debating, working to identify each article that need to be a part of the agreement. An agreement which finally was passed on March 4, 2018 at Escazú, Costa Rica. That's why so many people ask, why is it called Escazú? There you go. That's it. But that was only the beginning, because we still needed countries to ratify the treaty for the treaty to be effective. And allow me to mention a few of these countries, because I think it's important to bear in mind their commitment right at the beginning of the treaty. The first to ratify the treaty were Guyana, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Kitts and Nevis, Bolivia, and Uruguay. Uruguay, besides, is chairing the presiding officers today. Then we got Antigua and Barbuda, Nicaragua, Panama, Ecuador, St. Lucia. And then, with the unanimous ratification of countries such as Mexico and Argentina, and so many people that were the main players in those days and were important figures in the National Congress and are here today, finally the treaty became effective on April 22nd, 2021. Celebrating Mother Earth, our dear Mother Earth. And it is wonderful to welcome new members. We want more states to join, and today we're celebrating Belize, Chile, and Grenada joining the treaty, and celebrating too the relentless work by countries such as Colombia and Brazil to embrace and exceed the treaty. It is much more than just a legal tool. Escazú is a treaty of human rights. And to give it the right dimension, and make us think on the enormous commitment at this conference, because we must bear, or rather we are inspired by the struggle of the mothers and grandmothers of Plaza de Mayo fighting for the human rights, the legacy of Yolanda Ortiz, the first woman to fill a public position in environmental matters in Latin America, as well as the fight of environmental defenders who have given their lives and go way out of their way to work for the issues that we are addressing in this conference. For instance, Berta Cáceres. I cannot but mention her. And of course, we are committed to the indigenous people. They've been fighting, committing, respecting, full of wisdom for centuries, defending the Mother Earth. There's so much we have to learn from them, as well as the youth of environmental organizations who get together, organize, demand, fight, that raise the bar higher when we make environmental calls. their activism is fundamental, not just because they are committed to a better future, more decent, more fair, but also because they demand transforming the present time. And all of us have a moral duty to transform the present, no doubt. But all this here is not easy. No, nobody says it's easy. The region has been identified by more than 500 years of inequality. 500 years of inequality that translates and shows in the wealth of the Northern Hemisphere countries at the expense of exploiting our natural resources. An inequality that translates into the poverty of our people, in the not sustainable debt owed to those same countries that are developed today. Inequalities that once and again pose these crossroads challenges at the time of fighting for climate change, energy transition, and at the same time responding to the needs and rights of our people. How will we manage to face such an important problem and issue such as deforestation? A moment ago, we were talking with Minister Marina Silva about this. We have limited resources. Technical cooperation is not enough, and especially when we attend international fora and demand the services that our ecosystems provide, and nobody values them properly, our rivers, our jungles, our forests. How much do they contribute to the health of the environment? A lot, indeed. So once again, it's not easy, no, not at all, to think how we can supply well-being to our people, how to allow our people to develop in harmony with the environment. But I believe in politics as a tool, and I'm sure all of us here believe in policy to transform. Others may want to believe it's not so, but I believe in that. So we just have to correct the direction that might have been wrong, think of enlightening ideas to overcome these needs, and especially to include the voice of our people and the interests of those who made the most contributions to this environmental crisis that we are undergoing. And escazi is a recap of it all, because it encourages us to work as a region more and more integrated, united, deep down into our democracies, always believing it's this hand in hand with our citizens. And precisely one of the objectives of this conference is to choose the experts that will fill the committee for the support to the implementation and compliance of escazi, so that it can mean effectiveness. And then we will also have to face the roadmap to defend and protect our environmental defenders. A commitment that we agreed on at the COP in Chile last year, and how we keep on working as we did at Quito, Ecuador, and we intend to do so at this conference too. And something else that is important too is the need of something which is fundamental, the funding mechanisms. How are we going to fund it all? And that's why we created a voluntary fund, so that we could really pass. No more black and white, but rather taking action, implementing the agreement. Dear friends, fellow citizens of Latin America and the Caribbean, we have ahead of us 2 days full of challenges, which no doubt will foster a debate to voice what we expect of the development of Latin America and the Caribbean in the years to come. In short, I believe that's what this is about when we're talking about improving access to information, public participation, and the defense of our environmental defenders. I believe the pillars of escazi are our foundations to build upon true environmental democracy. They are a commitment with the histories of struggle, fight, with our present and also with the future generations. Thank you very much.
Agradecemos a la secretaria.
We thank the Secretary of Climate Change, Sustainable Development and Innovation, and we ask the Deputy Executive Secretary of the ECLAC, Raúl García Buchaca, the elected representative of the public, Michael Kaufmann, and Mr. Christian Asinelli from CAF. Good evening, everybody. Cecilia Nicolini, Secretary of Climate Change, Sustainable Development and Innovation of the Argentine Republic. Thank you very much for your words, for this opening session, for your presentation. Thank you for this marvelous cultural meeting through music. First of all, I would like to thank the nation, the Republic of Argentina, and its president, Alberto Fernandez, for their generosity, for welcoming us in this great city and this fabulous cultural center, where in October last year, during the 39th session of ECLAC, we were here. And I would like to recognize also the teams of your secretary and the people from the Ministry of Foreign Relations who have made this second meeting of the Conference to the Parties of the Agreement of Escazú possible. I would like to salute as well Mr. Michael Kaufmann, the representative of the public, and I would like to express my deep appreciation for the great work that you are doing with the representatives of the public, and I will refer to this later. Please remember that you have our support and our estimation. I would like to thank also Mr. Asinelli, the Corporate Vice President of Strategic Programming from CAF. Just a month ago, CAF and ECLAC signed a memorandum of understanding to strengthen the cooperation and promote the sustainable economic development of the region. At the meeting of the Board of Directors of CAF, which was held in Santiago, Chile. And now, we are here to show that the Escazú Agreement offers us a great opportunity to promote together sustainable development of the region, caring for the environment, and ensuring human rights. I also want to take advantage of this opportunity to express my gratitude to the ministers who are going to participate in this opening session. Mr. Robert Bouvier, who presides as the Uruguayan representative, who presides over the executive or the presiding officers, and who's leading us in this task. I would like to thank Minister Marina Silva, Minister of Environment from Brazil, a country we're looking forward to have as a party at the next conference of the parties. Senator Maureen Hyman Payne, who's the Minister of Legal Affairs of Antigua and Barbuda, and Minister Juan Cabandier, Minister of Environment and Sustainable Development of Argentina, both of them working as vice presidents of the Agreement of Escazú. I would like to thank all the authorities, all the delegates, colleagues, and friends. It is a great honor and it's a source of happiness to be here and to welcome you to the second conference of the parties to the regional agreement on the access to information, public participation and justice in environmental matters in Latin America and Caribbean, which is known as the Escazú Agreement. And ECLAC is its secretary, technical secretary. So all of us who are here and those who are virtually with us, we have to congratulate ourselves because of the achievements we have all achieved since the agreement of Escazú was adopted in Escazú, Costa Rica. First of all, I would like to underscore the recent incorporation of 3 new state parties: Chile, who was incorporated last year, and Belize and Grenada, who have just been incorporated. We know that there are other countries who are taking steps decisively to become members, and so we believe that this community is continue growing. I said that we have to congratulate ourselves because we are 15 state parties, and this shows the enormous political commitment in the region to work towards deepening environmental democracy and achieving in Latin America and the Caribbean this wish of sustainable development. And to achieve this goal of social justice, together with protecting the environment, it is absolutely necessary that all citizens, all persons and groups of vulnerable people, all of them must have tools to facilitate the exercise of their rights to information, to participation, and justice in environmental affairs. And it is precisely this agreement that it is committed to the significant participation of the public. And an example of this is the recent election of representatives last November. The representatives who come from Argentina, Brazil, Costa Rica, El Salvador, St. Lucia, and Trinidad and Tobago, they represent the public. They are the voices of the region, and they have a key task, which is promoting the participation in the different bodies of the Escazú Agreement, and also to support the participation of their countries. So we wish them success in this significant task and this noble work they have before them. From this moment onwards, this second extraordinary meeting, the Escazú Agreement will have a committee to support the implementation and support of the agreement, whose task will be to support the parties in the implementation of the agreement. There will be 7 members who will be competent in the rights of access and the different parts of the agreement, and they will have to be independent from the executive, legislative, and judicial party of their countries. And I want to recognize all the candidates who have volunteered to integrate this commitment, because all of them have shown with their effort and commitment, with their own lives, how committed they are to environmental affairs and the implementation of the Escazú Agreement in the region. I also believe it is worth mentioning that the first members of the committee who will be elected in this conference of the parties, they will be elected here in Argentina, which is going to be a historical milestone in this process, which will be remembered in the future. Let us not forget that the Escazú Agreement strengthens the capacities and the cooperation for the effective implementation of rights to access to information, participation, and access to justice in environmental areas in the region. And in this context, we have to recognize especially the parties who have started their process of implementation in their territories. What is the meaning of implementation? It means that we have to underscore and value the developments which have already been achieved, and also know the different areas which can be improved in their national order, national norms, and also their practices to fulfill the different provisions of the agreement. We have to identify the alliances with all the actors of social society, academia, the private sector, and all the other areas to face all these challenges. But this also means that we have to engage in dialogue with all the multiplicity of actors, and we have to define roads and plan actions, goals, and people. And we have to do this clearly. I want to underscore the work performed by Argentina, Chile, Ecuador, Mexico, St. Lucia, and Uruguay. We do hope that this momentum, this commitment towards action will trigger the interest of other countries to become members of the agreement. And that's why this conference has a meeting devoted to this goal. ECLAC, let me assure you, will be always at your disposal to support you in this joint road. As Cecilia said, we have only 3 days to commemorate the Day of Mother Earth. So let us not forget that the care for our environment is to take care of ourselves and to ensure our capacity to develop ourselves. But the other side of the coin is that our region, it is still the most dangerous for those who defend the environment. We know that it is impossible to preserve the environment if we don't protect those people who defend it. So the escazi agreement is a pioneer in this sense, and we should be proud to say that it's the first commitment in the world which has specific provisions for the protections of those defending human rights in environmental affairs. At the first conference of the parties last year, we integrated the first ad hoc group as an open task force of defenders of human rights, environmental affairs. And in Quito, we had great contributions which were significant and useful for this plan, which will be presented in 2024 at the second ordinary meeting of the Conference of the Parties for their consideration and adoption. So, apart from thanking Chile, Ecuador, St. Kitts and Nevis for their leadership in this area of defending environmental affairs, I want to thank the United Nations, the Program of United Nations for Environmental Affairs, the World Bank, and the OHCHR for all their support. And in particular, I want to recognize or to thank those more than 225 people who have participated from their own realities, their knowledge, and solutions, and finding solutions to all these problems. Climate change also reminds us that there are people and countries who are more vulnerable than others. In our region, the Caribbean is particularly vulnerable, so it requires special attention on our part. We have been working with the Caribbean, and we will continue doing so in order to reinforce environmental information, and we will support the implementation of the agreement together with the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. And to conclude, I wish you will take advantage of these productive meetings. We will continually work in order to improve the situation of all the Latin American and Caribbean people. And we invite you, we do foster you to continue working collaboratively in order to face the crises produced by man and in order to create a transition towards justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to ask Michael Kaufmann, representative of the public, to take the floor. we're doing well. Good evening, everybody. Welcome, all of you, to the city of Buenos Aires, and in particular to the Argentine Republic. As an Argentine, I'm honored to be able to address the second conference of the parties here. It's been some days now with colleagues that we've been talking about whether it had ever happened to us, this of believing that the world could be changed. It's something that it only lasts while you're young, but then you'll move out of it and you realize that the world cannot change. But I want to ask you to generate a coming and going, to have it interactive with you. Did that happen to you? Did you ever hear the people telling you that it's only young people who can believe the world can change? Please don't feel shy. Turn around, especially those in the first rows, and you'll see how many have raised their hands. So it's not only me, fortunately, who has had to face this. This is a collective feeling, and this is fundamental. But in this sense, I believe a question arises. Is it worth anything to get involved? Is it worthwhile or not? And we do coincide with my colleagues in this respect, in the sense that the Escazú agreement is a clear example that it is worthwhile to get involved, because in the long or in the short run, as representatives of the public, I'm addressing you in the framework of an agreement proposing a new environmental democracy model, a unique model internationally, and we have to vindicate it. Proud of being Latin Americans and Caribbean, because it's us that forged the escazi agreement. In that sense, I think it is pertinent to understand and point out that the escazi agreement is not the horizon but a starting point with a foothold of rights for equality, precisely in this region, the Latin America and the Caribbean, the most unequal region in all planet Earth. So it is fundamental for the starting point to be the beginning of our commitments, among other examples that we could pose, of the fact that we all are and want to be states parties. And in the framework of the escazi agreement, that would be to try to conceal the sun with your hand, to believe that only by being states parties is enough. By no means, ladies and gentlemen. Of course we recognize the states parties, but it is substantial to recognize that that is not enough, and encourage and call upon countries who still are not states parties to become so. We need more than 15. But it's not just that we need that. We also demand the authorities present here today of the different countries as authorities of each and every territory to do the most that can be done to transform the socio-environmental reality of your lands, because it has to be transformed quickly. And not just that. Certain commitments may be assumed throughout these days, but we need to pay special attention to what will happen as from Monday, because the commitments assumed here need to become material as from Monday next week. The social environmental issues are present 365 days a year, not just at Conference of the Parties. And even so, it is important to stress, in particular in this second Conference of the Parties, that we need to step forward as to the implementation, especially electing a committee for the support of the implementation and compliance that needs to be relevant. If we're not clear at diagnosing where we are and why we are when it comes to the environment, it will be very difficult to be clear enough to know what we need to move on. As we keep hearing speeches promising a better future, our region is amidst a three-time crisis: climate, democratic, and social and economic. The Latin American and Caribbean people are still undergoing economic crisis, greater violence, and an increasing inequality, and the climate crisis goes deeper and deeper into these realities, especially with vulnerable peoples such as local communities, indigenous peoples, Afro-descendants, and women. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, this is the moment to make a call. On what side of history will we stand? As Argentina is the host of this conference and the recent worldwide football champion, I dare say I'm going to draw an analogy. You know how important football is here in this country, and if we're talking in football terms, we're losing the match, and we've been losing it for quite some time. And actually, this is supplemental time, and the clock is ticking, and we're always behind. And if somebody in this room doesn't agree with this diagnosis, I call upon them so that they urgently will read the hundreds of reports that science throughout the planet has submitted to make evident that we're amidst an unprecedented crisis. This triple crisis, democratic, climatic, and social and economic, is also challenged and denied at every niche of the region, pushing politics to paralysis at the time of taking fundamental decisions. The issues will still keep going in every corner of our country. We don't transform the roots of which has led us to be where we are. Latin America and the Caribbean, the most unequal region of the planet Earth and the most dangerous one for those defending the environment and human rights. And we're talking about environmental justice, criminalizing protests, and social and environmental demands are the everyday thing in our region. We need justice specializing in the environment, as well as clear tools to avoid people to be hunted down, arrested, and murdered of those offering their bodies throughout our region. And I dare say I might go further, please excuse me. I want to give you some information, no minor information. The average age of those addressing you here today is 50 years old. And I'm bringing this because it's pertinent. If we're talking about building upon a different society, this means to have an intergeneration perspective, a different outlook, a gender outlook, and an outlook respecting cultural differences and the ancestral wisdom of our region. Young people demand to be a part of decision-making processes because no matter who says it or not, this is our present and our future. And it's not just the young people today, but the future generations, as we heard a moment ago. So this is clear. The current model is at its end. And I'm almost done. Don't be afraid. I won't take up more time. But something which is fundamental before closing. The institutional politics don't make the right call. They keep waiting for the right time to make transcendental calls. They deny climate change. They deny the rights. And this is a growing situation throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. But we cannot wait. And we won't wait to get the decisions that only keep on denying. We keep hearing bullets in the region because people are hunted down, people are made to stand trial arbitrarily, or they're even murdered to defend because they defend the planet and human rights. So the institutional politics have failed because they haven't provided us an accurate answer in this respect. It is important for institutional politics to dialogue with vulnerable groups. And going back to those conversations that I mentioned that we held with our colleagues at the beginning, I mentioned this at the beginning as well as with the public here present, those here on my left and on the stage or among the public if you're sitting on that side of the room, we were talking with them that those that keep doubting of whether to become involved, don't doubt it. It's important to participate because today we have an escazi agreement, unique as it is internationally, and as I said before, we have to claim and defend it and be proud about that. To recap, we are building upon a movement throughout Latin America, a movement in pursuit of building a more fair, more equitable, and sustainable region. This is us. Here we are. Here we will be until the world, and especially our dear region, is what we dream it to be. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Now, we will listen to Cristian Asinelli, Corporate Vice President of Strategic Programming of CAF. Good evening. Cecilia told me how difficult it is to speak after all the others. when the bar is so high, it is so difficult to speak. So the only thing I can do is to tell you what we do at CAF and what we do in order to be an actor in this phenomenon, in these actions taken by all the countries, in this endeavor of unity of Latin America and the Caribbean, with an instrument which is so significant as the escazi agreement on access to information, public participation, and justice in environmental matters. I want to thank the Minister of Environment, Juan Campanier, who's about to arrive, and the Secretary, Ms. Nicolini, who's presiding over this meeting. I would like to thank also Raúl Garcia Buchara, representative of CEPAL. It is such a pleasure to work with ECLAC. Just a month ago, we attended a meeting together, which was the reincorporation of Chile as a full member of CAF. So Chile now is a member not only of the escazi agreement, but it is also a member of an organization which was founded in 1968. And due to the military dictatorship, it interrupted its participation. We believe that this is a public asset, and we want to help the region, Latin America and the Caribbean. So I would like to thank also Mr. Garcia Buchada, who's the Deputy Executive Secretary of ECLAC. I would like to thank Minister Marina Silva, Michael as well, a sort of rock star, Maureen Payne, the Minister of Culture. Thank you very much for the excellent organization of shows like the one we have just enjoyed by Chango Spasiuk. We organized something with the CLAC in the framework of the actions performed by the Argentine government when it was the pro-temp president, and I missed the word he says, of CELAC, the Secretary of Strategic Affairs and the Minister of Public Affairs, with whom we have a common agenda at CAF, an agenda which will mean the change of millions of Argentine people. And I would like to thank all the authorities, and of course, I would like to thank the President, Alberto Fernandez, who will be closing this meeting. But I do want to underscore the participation of the young people who have been involved in this work. So the support, the work, the sustainability by civil society is paramount in this adventure. All of us know that Latin America is accountable for 8% of emissions which are devastating in other countries of the world. You know that droughts, floods have increased 80% in the last 20 years. And despite this, we in our region have 30% of drinking water, and at the same time, the geographical distribution of water is totally unequal. So the water management is key. 60% of the wildlife is in our region, and 25% of rainforest, the Amazon region, which is the habitat with the richest habitat in the world, the mangroves, the wetlands. And we are really poor emitters. So the emission we are accountable for is just practically negligible. So this takes me to the commitments in terms of water security and access to the equitable distribution of water. In the last conference of the United Nations, which was held on water, CAF announced $4 billion for the investment in water projects and sanitation, because all these ideas have to be translated into action. That means that we want to support Latin American and Caribbean nations to perform infrastructure works in order to achieve this change, as the first two presenters have said. We also attended the conference on the oceans in Lisbon, and we promised to invest $1.5 billion in order to improve upon the coast of Latin America, especially the Caribbean, which is so deeply affected by climate change. All this translates our commitment to be the blue and green bank, as our board has requested on several occasions. And just a year ago, this board, which is composed of the ministers of economy, they accepted, or they adopted, a historical capitalization of $7 billion, which is going to double the portfolio of projects. For an institution as CAF, which is integrated by Latin American and Caribbean countries, that is to say, poor countries who invest more money so that our countries may achieve a qualitative leap in all our policies. This is an effort in which we are involved, and I have to underscore it once again. This capitalization was accompanied by different requests by the ministers, which meant that we have to work together in environmental projects, and we have to generate $25 million in terms of investment in environmental affairs. So we developed initiatives like the program against climate change in the Galapagos Island, which has more, or which entails more than $100 million to enrich all the ecosystems of the islands, which have been attacked by the climate change, and this has to do with energy. We have a policy of sustainability to mobilize resources to our region. Why? Because the commitments assumed by developed countries, we can implement them through financing. Good evening, Minister. Welcome. We also have a network of biocities, which is an initiative in Latin America and the Caribbean, so that mayors may work in cities which are better planned, are greener, and more sustainable. We're going to attend a meeting in Denver next week in order to see how we can exchange information between the region and the United States. And last year, we launched a school which is called Laudato Si to generate education or environmental education. And we opened this in the Vatican, and we closed it in a city on the border between Peru, Colombia, and Brazil. The students attended classes during a whole year. They had to understand the problems that Mother Earth has. And in May next year, we're going to launch a similar school for the mayors of Latin American and Caribbean mayors in order to join the work performed by young people, so that this effort is not only education, but the activation of our ideas. Because mayors are next or near citizens in their municipalities. That is what the Minister of Public Works said when he was the mayor of the district of San Martin. It is very difficult to be a mayor because you have to face problems every single day. And as the preceding speaker said, the escazi agreement is a visionary agreement, unprecedented agreement in terms of environment and human rights. And in Argentina, we do appreciate this due to three reasons. The agreement reflects the peculiarities of the region and considers the different idiosyncrasies and the characteristics of each country. So it takes into consideration the interior of the region. Second, contributes to regional integration. That is part of our DNA. And this agreement contributes to integration in environmental terms in order to improve upon the conditions of living of future generations. And three, it's a historical milestone because it protects defenders of the environment, a characteristic of the treaty which has to be underlined. Let me stress the company of different groups of youth or young people who work in order to foster international organizations, to support governments, because they want us to accelerate our work, because we are running out of time. This has to be reflected in decision-making in the countries. But, as I said, it has to be pushed upward. It has to come from the grassroots, bottom up. So climate, sustainability, access to information are areas which are part of the social agendas, and that is seen, and you bear witness of this with your participation. This is a historical milestone, as I said. We have to take advantage. It is now or never, because if we don't face current problems, we will have terrible problems in the future. In our development bank, CAF, we are sure that we can cooperate with the regional countries in order to implement all these ideas effectively. All that has to do with public policies in the countries. And let me give you a concrete example. As we are in Argentina, we have to mention the energy transition, which in the case of CAF, we believe that has to be a fair energy transition. That's why the board unanimously carried a program to support the pipeline, the Néstor Kirchner pipeline, with $240 million. That will mean an improvement in Argentina, but also in the region. That is going to be reflected by public accounts, and it will mean more jobs for Argentina. So the commitment, the support, the recognition of all of us here, we do challenge, or we do face the challenges posed by the environment. As I said, all this is in our DNA. We want to have 40% of green operations. This is a commitment we have assumed. We have reached 30%. Next year, we will reach 40%. Only green operations through programs, projects, as many ministers here, as the Minister of Environment, Public Works, and Culture, all of them know that these projects change lives. The pipeline, for example, as the Minister of Public Works knows, sometimes building a pipeline is not supported by everybody, but it will eventually mean a change for all of us. As Michael mentioned, soccer and the World Cup, we also have the Pope. The Pope Francis, he teaches us that time is overcome space, that reality prevails over ideas, and the whole prevails over the parts. And now time prevails over space means that we must have a long-term vision. As Michael said, that reality prevails on conflict means that we must have robust commitments for the unity in Latin America and the Caribbean, which is reflected in the Escazú Agreement. That the whole prevails of the parts means that all of us can think of a future which is beyond our differences, which of course exist, and that reality prevails on ideas. That means that we have to work daily on concrete problems. So all of us, especially those who are the younger generation, have to implement this time because we are running out of time, because we have to do it together, because nobody can save him or herself alone. And the condition is the integration of Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you very much for your attention.
Very briefly, because we're running out of time, because what we want to do especially is by recognizing, and thank you, Raul, Christian, and Michael. But as Michael already took the floor, and he's one of the new representatives of the public on behalf of Argentina, but I'd also recognize the representatives of the public that have been elected, and Cesar Artiga from El Salvador, Nicole Leotot, Trinidad and Tobago. Nicole, are you here? Put up your hand. Giovanna Marchesini from Brazil. She has a whole lot of fans. Irene Murillo from Costa Rica. And Vishnu Tulsi from St. Lucia. All of them will make a big difference for our Escazú agreement. Thank you so much. And now, ministers need to come up so that we can close this inaugural ceremony.
Para continuar con las actividades de
Go on with the activities of this opening ceremony. We would like the Minister for the Environment of Uruguay, Mr. Robert Bouvier, the Parliamentary Secretary of the Ministry of Legal Affairs, Public Security and Labor of Antigua and Barbuda, Maureen Payne-Heyman, the Minister for the Environment and Climate Change of Brazil, Marina da Silva, and the Minister for Environment and Sustainable Development of Argentina, Juan Cabandier. We would like you all to come up to be able to take the floor.
A continuación habla el ministro Robert Bouvier.
Now we will listen to Minister Bouvier from Uruguay. Minister Robert Bouvier, Minister of the Environment of the Oriental Republic of Uruguay.
Buenas noches.
Good evening. Ministers of signatory states, Deputy Executive Secretary of ECLAC, Mr. Garcia Buchaca, Mr. Bejo from parties of the Escazú Agreement, Mr. Asinelli from CAF, guests, friends of Latin America and the Caribbean, all those who are here and those who accompany virtually. So we do welcome all of you to this second meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Escazú Agreement on access to information, public participation, and justice environmental matters in Latin America and the Caribbean. It is an honor to participate at this meeting, which has as a purpose to choose the representatives of the Committee for Implementation and Compliance, which will support the ideas of access to information, public participation and justice. I am not going to refer to all the actions which have been made by you with the participation of the public, that will be tackled at the third meeting, which will be held next year. I want to remind you that the agreement entered into force in 2021, the 21st of April, and this meeting is going to be significant. It's going to be a milestone in the escazi history because of all the contributions we're about to make. So the candidates have already been selected. First, it was a call for competitors for applicants, and this process opened a road of change. We had to express our confidence in the state parties, the signatory countries, the public, and in the public institutions of the civil society who work so much for the environment. The fruit are crystal clear, the fruits of this task. It's been quite satisfactory. The selection has resulted in 10 candidates, and 7 are going to be elected at this conference. A public and transparent process with a significant participation of the public, and we applied the criteria of gender, geographical distribution, and knowledge and experience. Only one person for each nationality. That's why we want to thank all those who have participated in the process of selection, especially those who presented their applications. Now, the list of candidates has been put for the consideration by the parties. Second, we want the parties to make efforts to integrate this committee as a sign of strength and support of this conference. We believe this is possible, this can be materialized, and this will be a second stage which will open the road for new challenges. So there are materials of work, and all this will multiply the chances we have. That's why we have to find cooperation and funds for the organization and better work of the committee, and especially to strengthen the domestic capabilities so as to implement the agreement in each of our countries responding to our own needs. I would like to underscore 3 different bodies which are different, but they have the same spirit of a cooperation. The Program of the United Nations for the Environment, CAF, and the High Office of Human Rights, the High Commission. So, the OHCHR. All this is feasible thanks to the support of ECLAC with their human resources. I would like to thank the executive secretary who hasn't been able to attend this meeting, and I want to thank the deputy executive secretary for all the support. I want to underscore the participation of all the public. I would like to thank the government and the citizens of Argentina for their effort in making all this meeting possible. Thank you very much.
Gracias.
Thank you very much. And now, Mrs. Maureen Payne Heyman, we would like you to take the floor.
Buenas noches. Good evening, everyone. I would like to adopt the protocols that have already been established by my good colleague on my left. I too would also like to acknowledge the government and the citizens of Argentina for graciously agreeing to host this important meeting and to express thanks for their hospitality. Colleagues, as you know, the Caribbean region is small in stature in comparison to many other regions and continents. We have smaller populations and land mass. However, the Caribbean is as diverse as any other region. We have a multiplicity of races in our countries, religion being practiced in our countries, and languages which are spoken in our countries. We have indigenous people living in our countries. We have the Amerindians in Guyana. We have the Carafunas in St. Vincent the Grenadines. We have the Caribs in Dominica, the Maroons in Jamaica, and the Mayans in Belize. And despite all our diversity, we are still a homogeneous group. Our region is also diverse in its geography and topography. We too have mountains, we have rivers, we have lakes, we have mangroves, we have jungles, we have rainforests and beautiful beaches. It's all in our region. But it's unfortunate that we suffer the consequences of climate change and global warming disproportionately. That's a well-established and well-known fact, and it has been referenced by persons who have spoken earlier. One of our greatest challenges is our size and our limited resources, so that when we experience the disasters of hurricanes especially, and flooding, it creates real challenges for our governments and our people. We are seeing and feeling the effects of global warming and climate change. We all see things in life, in time as it happens. We see the mudslides, we see the floods, wildfires, hurricanes, tornadoes, drought, extreme heat, and we see the ferocity of the destructions that they cause and how it impacts our collective lives. Extreme weather is having a devastating effect on our economies and our social structures, and it is even more acute when you're dealing with smaller populations and limited resources. The whole world is interlinked, whether we know it or not, and I think COVID-19, the pandemic, and the current war in Ukraine has taught us a lot about our codependencies and our vulnerabilities. No man is an island and no country can stand alone. We all need to help each other. We're all in this fight together. Our food security is an issue which we're all concerned about, and we can see how this is directly affected by climate change. If you don't get water, your plants can't prosper. If you have too much water, they die. If you have too much heat, they die. And what is the impact and consequence of this? Starvation, malnutrition, forced displacement, migration. And I don't want to get into migration because that's the topic, but climate change is affecting us in every which way of our lives. And what we need are well-designed environmental policies which takes into account traditional knowledge and our cultural values. Historically, Black people, indigenous people, minorities, vulnerable groups, and their communities have been exposed to the greater environmental health hazards and risks, much more so than rich and wealthy communities. And I have to say this, these rich and wealthy communities are predominantly non-Caucasian. Those most affected by climate change and global warming are Black people, people of color, vulnerable people. Poor and marginalized groups everywhere bear the brunt and the impacts of climate change and global warming. And ironically, as we all know, they are the least responsible for the damage. In our region, the Caribbean region, the dichotomy has always been between economic development versus the environment. Because we need foreign direct investment. We have large companies and organizations knocking at our door. They want the best from our countries. They want the best sites. They want the best beaches. They want everything. They want concessions. And they put their profits and needs before us, the Caribbean, and our people. And I want to say it cannot just be about profits. It cannot just be about money and a few jobs. The long-term impact of development and construction must be evaluated environmentally and from a health perspective as well, because when the environment is damaged, it affects our health, our well-being, our mental health, and the social structure of our communities. And it will lead to crime and all sorts of things. So when we look at investment in our communities, our governments must look at the long-term effect. We are seeing a loss of our biodiversity at an alarming rate. We see ocean acidification, we have resource depletion. The warming of the ocean is affecting our mangroves and our coral reefs are dying. As I said, the sea is warming, our oceans are warming, and we are suffering from sargassum seaweed. That has taken claim to our beaches. It's taken over, it's making our beaches unsightly and uninviting. So I want to say, we in the Caribbean, we are seeing and feeling the impact and damage of climate change and global warming to our environment. And I know time is short, but I want to say escazi is a very important and powerful tool, not just for now, it's for our generations, and it's going to support a sustainable environment. Escazi puts people at the forefront. I think this is important. It's looking at the persons who are most affected. And what it does is it gives them access to the information. And let's face it, if you don't have information, you cannot make an informed decision. So it's incumbent upon people to force their governments to give them the information they need. Because if you don't have the information, you cannot assess the impact it's going to have on your environment. And consequently, when you have that information, you can become part of the decision-making process. And I want to say, if your voices are not heard, because they should be heard if you're part of the decision-making process, but if their voices are not heard, you listen but you hear. There's a difference between listening and hearing. So if your voices are heard but not listened to, what escazi does, it guarantees you access to justice. And this is important. This must not be taken lightly, because when you're dealing with developers and people who want to come into your country and build whatever they want to build, and they stay for maybe 20 years, reap all the benefit, and leave our countries worse off. And when they go, they don't even look back. So why it's important to have access to justice is that when you're up against people who have money, they will wear you out. They will go to court, because going to court is very expensive. It's tiring and it's stressful. But what escazi does, it gives people an opportunity. It gives you a fighting chance. So this must not be taken lightly, because going to court is very prohibitive. The cost alone will put you off. So it's very important. I think this is very important for escazi, that we are saying to people, do not be afraid. Not because they have more money than you, not because they can go to court. You too can go to court. And when you have the information, you can challenge any decision which is not in the best interest for your community and long-term benefit for your country. What I like about escazi is that escazi brings honesty, transparency, and accountability in environmental matters. It gives communities an avenue that they never had before to be an integral part in the decision-making process in environmental matters which affects them, and it affects them for generations. And it's important that their voices are heard. I made reference to traditional knowledge and cultural norms. This is what is important. When you make a decision and you're an integral part of it, you know the land better than many people who just come to do an environmental impact assessment. So I want to say, I'm going to wrap up soon, that escazi can only go from strength to strength with our commitment and determination. And I'd like to welcome Belize and Grenada and Chile to the escazi family, and I'm sure you'll bring lots of interesting information to us. So ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank ECLAC for all the hard work they've put in over the years. It's been a long process, but it's been worth it. So colleagues, I want to say to my colleague presiding officers and friends, let us put our ideas and thoughts together to make escazi COP #2 a resounding success. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Muchas gracias. Dirige la palabra.
Thank you very much. And now we will hear Miss Minister Marina Silva.
Good night, good evening. I would like to congratulate Mrs. Payne, who's the Parliamentary Secretary at the Ministry of Legal Affairs and Public Safety of Antigua and Barbuda, because of the intervention, which was so remarkable. I would like to thank also the Minister of Environment of the Oriental Republic of Uruguay. And I would like to thank also the Minister of Environment and Sustainable Development of Argentina, Juan Cabandier. And I would like to congratulate as well Cecilia, because I know she is a part of all this effort, who gives us the opportunity to participate here. I really so happy. I was deeply moved by the cultural show, which was so touching. And thanks to this, we can see how art can help to improve upon politics, to create a space of creation, which sometimes we believe it's impossible. When we see those artists who are so committed to their music and art, I'm so proud to represent the country, my country, Brazil, and to be on behalf of President Lula, who has shown that although Brazil is not a member of the agreement of Escazú, President Lula has stated that, has presented to the parliament, to the Brazilian parliament, to incorporate or to adopt this agreement. So at the next meeting, we will not be just passive actors, something that President Bolsonaro imposed on us. So I believe that this is a turning point for Brazil. We want to be an active implementer of all the agreements and instruments which are going to be mentioned here. The government of President Lula understands how significant this agreement is, because this is an agreement which was originated in the Conference of Rio in 1992, and now we have a regional agreement to deal with the significance of sustainable development, the protection of the environment, transparency in relation to information, the control of social participation in the processes of change, of paradigms to reach a new model of development. And this is going to be the chance to our countries and our region to be, at the same time, socially just, combating poverty, which in my country, 30 million people who live with less than $1 a day. So this is going to be a chance for us to be economically prosperous, combating inequality. We are going to be environmentally sustainable, protecting the natural roots of our development. We also want to be politically democratic, because we know that the absence of democracy means that we are going to be lagging behind in the implementation of agendas which are strategic. So this means we're going to have rules, and we have a great challenge to stabilize our democracy, to implement all these agreements. Because when we don't have stability, we don't have democratic stability, we result in a pendulum policy, and sometimes we just miss the point, and we even go backwards. And that is terrible, because this is a regression. So we have to stabilize policy, we have to implement long-term policies and not only short-term actions. Sometimes it's difficult because they are not translated to votes and popularity, but it is necessary. Gilberto Gil says that our people knows what it wants, but sometimes doesn't know. So the people is one thing, and the governments are the ones who have to do things and to, for example, challenge the pandemic, because when we don't, society is going to demand from us. Another thing I would like to share with you is the need for pay attention to the moment we're living. It is extremely serious. This is a crisis. I would like to say it's a civilization crisis, which is economic, social, environmental, and political, a crisis of values. And there are moments of crisis like this. We have to know that we run two risks. We may be ingenious to be naive. And the other thing is that we may believe that the problem is so big, it has such a magnitude, that we are not in a condition to solve it. And there is a third problem, which is consensus. Empty consensus. When everybody agrees, for example, the crisis is serious, something has to be done, but nobody does anything. So this is the moment to lead with example. This is the moment to face the transition agenda, the agenda of climate change, and bear in mind new ideas, climate justice, environmental racism, and how these agendas are cross-cut, they are interlinked. We have to make the world be a world worth living. President Lula says that we have to work together in order to progress some agendas. Our minister, my ministry, was so much damaged. The first time I was minister, I was 44 years old. Now I'm 65, and I'm so sad to see that we have, for example, made a lot of efforts to combat the deforestation in Amazonia, and now deforestation is terrible. We had made progress, and Brazil had left the map of poverty, and now again we are a protagonist in this map of poverty. Sometimes we go back, and sometimes we make a regression. That's why we cannot see politics and history linearly, because history is not only progress. History may produce regressions, and these regressions are suffered by those peoples who are not aware of their own destinies. That's why we need each other, and Latin America has to embrace, all of us have to embrace each other. With the leadership of President Lula, which considers climate as a priority, who commits himself to combat deforestation and to reach deforestation zero by 2030, combating inequality, creating a new cycle of prosperity with economic, social, environmental, and political sustainability. With these words, I do thank all of those people who have committed themselves in order to organize this second conference of the parties to the escazi agreement. And I do hope that the flag of Brazil will be here, and I said, not as an observer, a passive actor, but as an active protagonist with all the other protagonists in the region.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Recibimos a continuación.
We will now ask, we would like to welcome Mr. Alberto Fernandez, the president of the Argentine nation.
Acto seguido.
And now, the Minister for the Environment and Sustainable Development, Mr. Juan Cabandia. Thank you very much. Good evening. Good evening to all of you present here with us. I'd like to greet the ministers in this panel. Robert, thank you for being here, the same as Maureen. And it's been a pleasure also to have had Marina here. And your words were powerful. Indeed, they were. And we're so pleased, aren't we? Because we have the president of the Argentine nation with us, and it's good to share with him this meeting, which is very important. A meeting, a seminar with decades and decades fighting by environmental activists, also activists defending human rights, civil society organizations, some administrations. So once again, here we are in a successful path ahead of us as we can envisage because of this tool, this instrument, which is the escazi agreement, which, according to the decision made by Argentina and our president, we we ratified the adoption by the Argentine Congress, and we're very, very happy to participate and be a member of this agreement, which keeps growing day by day, which is, it's ours, it's the regions, it belongs to Latin America and the Caribbean, and it's an important instrument. As greetings, I don't want to leave anybody out because I want to greet all those present and recognize the UNEP, CAF, Christian, and each and every member of environmental movements from different countries that are here today. I think the challenge ahead is huge, but we have to congratulate each other because of this meeting, and at the same time, I do want to go into diplomacy or diplomatic discourse, because very often in these fora, international fora, we say too many words, we hear too many words, and the diplomatic narrative sometimes is instrumental to no change. And, you know, the Paris Agreement was significant, wasn't it? But what we've seen all along was heard a lot of words, a lot of meetings, nice manners, polite manners, very formal ladies and gentlemen, but few actions and few commitments as to the Paris Declaration, such as the responsibilities that need to be differentiated regarding the central countries and the funding, which was the Copenhagen, Denmark 2019 meeting, funding that had to be provided to developing countries, low-income countries, and the funding that we never get enough. We never get the amounts that Copenhagen set forth. So I believe the escazi agreement will be a way to reaffirm something very important, which was set forth after the Second World War in the Universal Human Rights Agreement and the protection of the rights of people, an integral protection of people, of persons, and to reaffirm that is positive. But at the same time, our challenge is that we need to move on in the fundamental agenda, because we certainly don't ignore the fact that some countries hunt down environmental activists, and that they also hunt down those defending the fact that agricultural borders don't have to be extended against the forestry basins. And the 2021 statistics showed a lot of deaths, and 70% of those assassinations, murders, were due to the people wanting to protect native forests. So I believe it's not just principles set forth in the escazi agreement and the involvement of civil societies and making calls and taking decisions, which are a qualitative leap, but we also have to bear in mind fundamental issues, which are actually supplemental to it all. Because if we only care for an integral protection of the activists or the defenders of an ecosystem, and we don't solve fundamental issues that are pending, we will always have to address the wrong problems. No doubt, the challenge is to think a way for productive development in our planet. Can anybody think we can have a different outcome if we go on with the same productive development model? If we only talk about developing countries and we don't begin to talk about overdeveloped countries and the growth that the wealthy countries expect worldwide, 6, 7, 8% annually, doesn't that have an impact on the planet's contamination? Doesn't worsen the climate change crisis? I mean, we have to think who boosts the extension of the agricultural borders. Multinational companies putting pressure on primary countries such as the ones in the region to keep extending the agricultural border. So we certainly cannot allow that. While we are hosting this escazi meeting, the central countries with their multinational companies are also celebrating this, but not changing any productive methods. So there you are. That's the obligation. We have to rethink, to change practices, modify them, and this agreement is demanding upon us. And I believe these requirements that we have set forth and reaffirmed, the member countries, we have to also be demanding on each other and also on the rest, because the most emissions, as we all know, planet-wise, take place in the Northern Hemisphere. The Northern Hemisphere represents 85% of greenhouse gas emissions. Of course, in the Northern Hemisphere, we have to separate Central American countries and the Southeast countries, and to whether the rich countries of the North represent over 80% of the emissions. And those Northern Hemisphere countries want to demand the same commitments from us that they never had and that they don't comply. And we, as we think that the problems are more than environmental, they're social and environmental, we have to solve two issues: inequalities, 20th century inequalities, and environmental 21st century challenges. The central countries, the inequalities of the 20th centuries, they've sorted that out, but they don't comply and fulfill the 21st century commitments. But we people, though the context is not a good one, we have committed to take care of the planet, to protect it, to embrace the environmental agenda, to reduce greenhouse gases, and put together mechanisms to care for biodiversity, not contaminate, despite we lack the funding of central countries, which have committed but don't fulfill their commitments. And we will allow our countries to develop, because we certainly cannot allow for poverty and extreme poverty in our region, because the only way to move out of that situation is by producing. But we will not produce as Europe and the US did. We will produce in the framework of sustainability. And that takes longer, means more resources, which are scarce. But we will go along with it because we believe and we want a world that the next generations can live in. And we will also care for ecosystems. And we have to tell the world, as Marina said, all together, as Maureen and Robert said, all together now, because without the Amazons, without our forestry basins, without the Chaco area in Argentina, without our waterlands, the world would not be a place to live in. And that's why we expect to be offset. We want to develop, but rich countries, wealthy countries need to understand that we need that funding that they committed to. And this is how, undoubtedly, we will fulfill the goals set forth and pay off the 20th century debt that we still have.
Muchas gracias. Y antes de cerrar con
Thank you very much. And before closing with the President's words, we shall keep recognizing the different Latin American Caribbean countries which have acceded the escazi agreement recently, this environmental agreement of Latin America and the Caribbean. So we will ask the Secretary for Climate Change, Sustainable Development and Innovation, Mrs. Cecilia Nicolini, to come up, and we will ask all the authorities to stand up so we can grant these awards. In the first place, we would like the Undersecretary for the Environment, Mr. Maximiliano Proaño, from Chile, and Gloria de la Fuente, the Undersecretary for Foreign Affairs, a recognition for their work representing their country. And this is delivered by the Secretary of Climate Change, Sustainable Development and Innovation, Cecilia Nicolini.
We invite now to come to the stage the representative of Belize, Vanessa Figueroa Wade, who's the Undersecretary of the Ministry of Sustainable Development, Climate Change and Risk Reduction. The recognition is given by the Minister of Argentina. Thank you. And now we invite the permanent representative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Trade, Ms. Hutchinson from Grenada. She's going to receive the recognition, and that is going to be given by the President of Argentina, Mr. Fernandez. Okay. We would like the authorities to go back to your place, and to close this ceremony, we're going to listen to our President, Dr. Fernandez. Thank you very much. Good evening. Thank you, all of you. And let me congratulate you on your patience for being here so late. I really celebrate that you have done so. I will really congratulate all the speakers. I haven't been able to listen to all of you, and I listened to the inspiring words by Marina da Silva. We are here because of the escazi agreement. This is an agreement to involve civil society in a problem affecting the world. We do not live a climate change. We have a climate crisis. These are two different things. When we speak about the climate change, we may suppose that it is a topic which is manageable. But if you have the clear dimension of what is happening, which is a tremendous climate crisis, which conditions prosperity and the well-being of many peoples, the scene is different. I was thinking that in reality, the escazi agreement had that merit. I mean, the problem of crisis, of climate crisis, appeared on the agenda, and we can see the dimension it has, and it allows the actors of social society to see what is happening, and governments have to prevent deepening that crisis. So we have to know what governments are doing in order to exit or to leave that crisis behind. And as Juan has so well expressed that, and Marina Silva has also stated that remarkably, South America and the Southern Hemisphere have not caused this crisis. Definitely, they have not caused this crisis. The cause of the crisis is avarice, greed, financial capitalism, uncontrolled capitalism, which wants to multiply gains, ignoring the damage it is causing. We are living in a world in which 10 people have the fortune of 40% of the people in the world. So that inequality is so deep and is only sustained by the lack of attention, the lack of interest, and the planet has become a sort of unlivable environment. When these people realize how serious the situation was, they decided to reach an agreement, and the first agreements were signed in Japan, in Paris, and Argentina has always participated and signed those agreements, convinced that the country was facing a deep crisis. We didn't want that crisis to deepen, of course. But years go by, and the crisis does not seem to be solved, does it? Last year, I presided over the CELAC, which is a community of Latin American and Caribbean states. And to tell you the truth, I realized that the climate problem affects the whole continent, and in particular, the Caribbean. And the people from Grenada know this very well. When you see that the Caribbean has changed its climate abruptly, and the main concern they have is how the sea level is rising. And the Prime Minister of Barbados told me at the COP held in Scotland that part of her territory was covered by water. These are island countries, and one of the islands has disappeared because of water. And this growth and how the sea is progressing, that entails an enormous risk for island states. But it's not only water, it's tornadoes, which appear now and which not exist in the past, and they make whole populations, they are washed away. And we think, what a terrible problem the Caribbean has. But what about Argentina? It is suffering now the worst drought since 1929. We had never seen such a tremendous drought. 100 years, practically, have elapsed. In these 100 years, the drought has such a magnitude. This affects us so much because 30% of our agricultural and livestock production is lost. And the whole society loses because we lose reserves, we do not have the circulation of goods and services we all need. So we are suffering the consequences of this climate crisis in any corner of the world. What Minister Cabandia said is true. So all of us suffer this crisis, but not all of us have the same responsibility. In Argentina, we believe we are 0.7 responsible for the greenhouse gases and its effects. And Latin America has practically nothing to do with pollution of our environment. But let's think about Africa, which suffers these effects terribly. You have a look at the African map and you see that deserts are advancing. And what about the forests? the rainforests, which provide oxygen to our planet, as it is in our case, the Amazon region, the region in Chaco, the Andean forests, which provide oxygen to a developed world, which is not really concerned about the oxygen needed by human beings. That's why this development has been an infamous development. The development of financial capitalism, it has generated a tremendous inequality in the world, unfathomable. And have a look at the pandemic. Have a look at the number of deaths in the poorer countries and the number of deaths in more developed countries. Those countries are not necessarily more egalitarian. They have more wealth, which has concentrated in just a few. And if you want to know what I'm talking about, go and walk along the streets in Los Angeles, and you will see that there are many people there who live in tents in the streets because they don't have houses any longer. And the state tells those people to go distribute those tents. And New York has just made regulations about the public space because of homeless. And go to Oxford Street if you want to go to Europe, and you will see there people sleeping in the streets. We have a world which is really unequal, and the pandemic has shown this. So let us reflect just for a second how vaccines were distributed. When the vaccine appeared, 90% of vaccines were concentrated in 10% of the population, and the 90% of population had to fight to get 10% of the vaccines available. That is the world in which we live. A terrible world, an unequal world. This unequal world has a challenge now, which is to not to hurt the planet, because the planet is our home, is a big village. As the sons of neoliberalism used to say, the big village which never existed, which was treated so badly. So what is left is to sum up efforts. I repeat that globalization, as it was conceived at the beginning, no longer exists. That big village no longer exists. We don't help each other. Some people took advantage of that phenomenon, and some others lost a lot. And we have realized that globalization no longer exists, and we live in a system in which globalization is rethought. So we want delocalization, relocating enterprises. Before, companies used to go, for example, to Mexico because labor was more economic there. But that meant a problem. Why? Because China has developed dramatically, and now they generate a geopolitical problem. So this is a process of relocation. That means that the companies are taken from those places and they are taken to the original place. So let's read Marina Mazzucato, who explains this marvelously. With this new dimension of globalization, regions have are the protagonists, because now we have no longer a community of nations, we have a community of regions. And in Europe, they concentrate the joint forces in order to face the challenge imposed by the States and China. And what does Latin America do, I wonder? There's something we have to regret, that the Trump administration meant that there was a lack of union in Latin America. We were divided. And who lost? Latin Americans, of course, because as the poem by Mario Benedetti reads, in the street, if we work together, hand in hand, we are more. So together, we are stronger. And what does Latin America have to offer at this moment? One thing we can demand, we have to demand the world to realize that we are creditors, climate creditors, because we do not cause this tragedy. And we have the remedies to support and solve this tragedy. Secondly, we have to understand we have to work together to save the planet. Of course, I do have to think about how much I love President Lula, the friendship we have. Thank God Lula is back. Thank God Marina is back, who takes care of the Amazon. Thank God there is a government in Brazil which watches that this debate is not something circumscribed to experts. It's a crisis of the humanity. And thank God we have the Amazonia, which is the lung of the world. Thank God we can join forces in Latin America in order to ensure, to guarantee the oxygen that the rest of the world and ourselves need. And thank Boric, President Boric is in Chile. Thank God, Petro is in Colombia. Divided we lose. And we have been working together in this, my friend and myself. So we have all the conditions to achieve this unity in Latin America and the Caribbean. When I was sworn in CELAC, my commitment was that the next president had to be somebody from the Caribbean. St. Vincent and the Grenadines now presides over the CELAC. Why did we do that? Because we generate trust among ourselves. There are countries which are more powerful or less powerful. Mexico and Brazil are the leaders in the economic arena. Some are in the middle and some are very small, but all of us are necessary. I have a significant role. And in this task we have before us is to make everybody realize, to make our peoples realize that we have to preserve the environmental activists. We have to take care of them because they are protecting our lives. The violence they suffer is violence imposed by the powerful, those who want to introduce just little changes to keep everything constant. But we know we want big changes. We don't want to, for example, suffer the felling of the Amazon forest and in the north of Argentina, so that what are we talking about? We are talking about how we can live better in our world with no discrimination, because environment does not discriminate between the poor and the rich, and sometimes it maltreats those that have not. Thank you very much. I would like to thank those countries who have just been incorporated. You can count on me. Thank you very much.
Finalizada.
Having heard the President of Argentina, we shall now ask Raúl García Buchaca to come up, as well as Mijail Haufan, Christian Asinelli, Maximiliano. This opening ceremony of the second meeting or second conference of the parties to the escazi agreement.
Ahora sí, damos por finalizada la ceremonia inaugural.
So this is the end then. We are calling it a day, the closing of the opening ceremony of the COP of the Parties 2 to the escazi agreement. Thank you very much for having joined and be here today.